Building a country isn't like following a neat recipe. For the United States, it was way more like a frantic improvisation, solving one crisis only to, well, create the next one. This is the story of a nation that was forged not by some perfect plan, but by a really messy, continuous cycle of trial and error. So let's just dive right in.
So just picture this for a second. You've done it. You've overthrown one of the most powerful empires on Earth, and you did it because you were terrified of its tyrannical, all-powerful central government. So now, your number one goal is to create something new that can never, ever do that again. But here's the question, right? How do you make a government that's strong enough to actually work, but weak enough that it can't become the very monster you just fought a war to escape?
Well, their first attempt to answer that question, it was a document that tilted heavily towards weak. This was America's first draft, its initial solution to that problem of potential tyranny.
It was called the Articles of Confederation. And the key word here is confederation. It's basically just an alliance. You have to remember, the former colonies saw themselves as 13 independent states that would, cooperate when they felt like it. They were absolutely terrified of creating a powerful, distant government that could just boss them around like a brand new king.
And this is where that fear really translates into practice. The new national government, it couldn't tax anyone. So it couldn't pay its debts from the war, it couldn't raise a national army to defend the country, it couldn't even regulate trade, so you had states slapping tariffs on each other. And the craziest part? To fix any of this, you needed a unanimous vote from all 13 states, which, as you can imagine, was basically impossible. Their solution to tyranny had created a brand new problem, a government that was just too weak to govern.
So obviously that wasn't working. To fix the broken articles, the founders went back to the drawing board and they created the Constitution, a much, much stronger federal government. But this solution immediately kicked off a brand new fundamental conflict over what America was even supposed to be.
And this slide just lays it all out perfectly. On one side, you've got Alexander Hamilton. He's envisioning this powerful nation, driven by manufacturing, banking, and a strong central government that's run by, the educated elite. And then on the other side, you've got Thomas Jefferson. He's dreaming of an agrarian republic, a country of independent, small-scale farmers with power resting in the states and a deep, deep trust in the wisdom of the common person. I mean, these weren't just small disagreements. There were two completely different blueprints for the country's very soul.
And here's the crucial point. This debate, it wasn't just theoretical. No, it led directly to the creation of America's first political parties, Hamilton's Federalists and Jefferson's Democratic Republicans. This was the very thing George Washington warned everyone about in his farewell address, the danger of political parties. So, the solution of a stronger government had birthed the new problem, permanent political division.
Hamilton's financial plan is the perfect example. So, to solve the nation's massive war debt, he had the new federal government just assume all the states' debts. Now, from his perspective, this was genius. It built national credit and tied the wealthy to the success of the new country. But for Jefferson's side, it was a terrifying power grab by the central government, one that rewarded speculators and punished the states that had been more responsible. Okay, so with the new government up and running and its political divisions already taking shape, the nation turned to another solution, something to try and foster a little unity and growth, expansion. The big idea was to push westward and build a powerful, interconnected economy.
Now, a key part of this was a plan they called the American System. It had three main parts. First, protective tariffs, to make foreign goods more expensive and get people to buy American. Second, a national bank, to create a stable currency for everyone. And third, federal funding for roads and canals, what they called internal improvements, to physically knit the country's different regions together. It was this grand vision for an economically independent and totally interconnected nation.
And as the nation started looking west, it made some pretty big promises. The Northwest Ordinance, which was one of the most important laws from this time, explicitly said that the land and property of Native Americans would never be taken without their consent. That was the official policy, the ideal for how this expansion was all supposed to happen.
But the reality, well, it was very different. This is President Andrew Jackson, and he's justifying the Indian Removal Act. Listen to how he frames it, as this benevolent act, a way to protect Native Americans from white settlement and allow them to civilize on their own terms. It's just a really stark look into the paternalistic and discriminatory views that drove the actual policy.
And here is the brutal outcome of that solution.
Jackson's policy led directly to the Trail of Tears. The U.S. Army forcibly removed 16,000 Cherokee from their ancestral lands. Thousands died in camps and on the forced march west. The solution of westward expansion for national growth created a devastating new problem: the violent, forced removal of entire peoples.
Now, at the same time the nation was expanding geographically, another solution was popping up to solve the problem of being economically dependent on Europe: the Industrial Revolution.
And a key invention here was Eli Whitney's cotton gin back in 1793. Before this machine, cleaning cotton was just an incredibly slow, difficult process. The gin completely solved this problem, making it possible to clean massive amounts of cotton with incredible speed.
And the impact was staggering. I mean, cotton production just exploded. The U.S. went from producing about 750,000 bales of cotton in 1830 to nearly 2.85 million bales just 20 years later. The South became the world's cotton kingdom.
But that economic solution came at an absolutely unthinkable human cost. To feed the insatiable appetite of all these cotton gins, the demand for labor just skyrocketed. The enslaved population grew right in lockstep with cotton production, rising to over 3.2 million people by 1850. The machine that was supposed to bring economic independence, it instead became an engine for the massive expansion and entrenchment of slavery.
And it's worth noting, Whitney also pioneered interchangeable parts for manufacturing firearms. And this idea, it revolutionized how everything was made, laying the groundwork for the industrial might of the North. So you see, industrialization was changing the entire nation, but it was doing it in these deeply divided ways.
So as we pull back and look at the big picture, a really clear and painful pattern starts to emerge. Every single solution, every step forward, it seems, came with a heavy price.
This table really brings it all together, doesn't it? The fear of tyranny leads to the weak articles. The chaos from that leads to the Constitution, which in turn creates deep political division. The need for growth leads to westward expansion, which results in the forced removal of Native Americans. And the quest for economic independence through industry leads to the horrific entrenchment of slavery. It's just a relentless cycle. And that's really the heart of it, you know? The history of the early United States wasn't this neat and tidy story of founding fathers who had all the answers. No, it was a story of solving immediate problems with solutions that, time and again, planted the seeds for the nation's biggest and most painful future conflicts.
Which really leaves us with a final question. Is this cycle, problem, solution, new problem, is that simply the inevitable, messy nature of progress itself? Or is it a pattern from America's founding that we're still grappling with in the challenges we all face today?